So chapter 13 is all about endocrine function, and so we will be looking in this lecture at the general functions of the endocrine system, and then we will move on to talk about one type of hormone that is produced in the endocrine system, the steroid hormones. So the endocrine system is the second way that the body controls or provides regulation of the body. And so we talked about the nervous system in those 3 chapters in the very first semester of the course. We discussed the nervous system that provides the short-term control of the body, rapid response control of the body. And the endocrine system, on the other hand, provides what's thought of as the long-term regulation and control of the body. It's composed of clusters of cells, of tissues and organs whose function is to secrete chemical messengers. We talk about these as hormones, these chemical messengers, into the fluids around them. And unlike the secretory structures that we discussed around the epithelial system and the digestive system, these hormones are not released through a duct, and they're not released to an apical surface like we saw in the exocrine glands. So remember, there are exocrine glands. These use a duct and they secrete to an apical surface. So they're involved with epithelial tissues. On the other hand, the endocrine system, endocrine glands are ductless. That means that they secrete, rather than into a duct, they secrete just around them into the interstitial fluid, and there are a few that can secrete directly into the bloodstream. So either into interstitial fluid or into the bloodstream, and it's not about any apical surface anywhere. So once these hormones have been put into body fluids, then they will diffuse on into the blood, and it's by the bloodstream that they're distributed throughout the body. Now, a hormone will act at what it's called a target cell, and a target cell is, we know it's a target because there is a receptor associated with that cell inside that's associated with the hormone inside of the target cell or on the surface of the membrane of the target cell. So the thing that makes a cell a target cell is a receptor. All that's required to be a target is a receptor. And so cells across the body may be targets and have receptors in or on their cell membrane. And so we can produce different actions in different locations of the body using just one hormone to do that. So a single hormone can control the activity of multiple cells and organs, and it can cause a different function depending on the cell that it is binding in. So the effect of an endocrine secretion of a hormone is generally slow to appear. Probably the most rapid acting hormone is epinephrine and norepinephrine, the 2 hormones that are secreted from the medulla of the adrenal gland. And their effect can be seen within 5 to 15 seconds, and they achieve peak effect about 30 seconds after they've been secreted into the blood or into interstitial fluid and blood. So their effect is super rapid for an endocrine gland, but very slow, like eons slow from the perspective of a neuron that can produce 700 action potentials every second. So slow acting in general, especially compared to the rapidity of the nervous system. And unlike nervous stimulation, which is usually short term, you have to give it another hit regularly in order to keep a stimulus being provided to an effector tissue, the endocrine system produces effects that tend to last for a very long time, days or longer. So when endocrine secretions, when hormones are released, what are the effects that we see throughout the body? And there are a number of different kinds of effects that endocrine glands can produce in their target tissues. We can either speed up or slow down the rate of a chemical reaction. So that's what I mean by controlling that rate. Make a reaction happen more quickly or slow down a chemical reaction in the body. So what that is saying, sort of the translation of that. If you hear a dog barking, I'm sorry, my dog is out on the front porch and she don't want in, but she's making noises about something. So there's the ability to control the rates of chemical reactions, to increase metabolic rate or slow it down, to produce mechanisms that will move materials across a cell membrane, either into a cell or out of a cell, or across a membrane within the cell. We see lots of homeostasis around electrolytes and around blood pressure, thanks to hormonal secretions. And then lots of regulation about reproduction, about the growth and the development of cells. So lots and lots of different kinds of effects based on an endocrine secretion. And I'm going to add one more here, and that is produce a new material in the cell. I think that's this, it's an extension of number one here, that we can initiate chemical reactions that will produce proteins or will produce some other, some other cell product. Okay. So hormones are not the only secretions that have a controlling function. Hormones are the ones with long distance action. So a secretion from the pituitary gland up in the brain can have an effect out in the muscles of the toe, for instance. So there are other kinds of secretions. We talk about paracrine secretions. These are fluids or controlling chemicals that are secreted into interstitial fluids, but because they are broken down very quickly by enzymes found in body fluids, they only have the chance to cause an effect at one of the nearby cells. Para means nearby or neighboring, alongside, I think is another way to think of it. So paracrine secretions, pardon me, it's morning and I'm still trying to wake up, I guess. Paracrine secretions will affect neighboring cells. Autocrine secretions, these are released out into the interstitial fluid, but they only affect the cell that produces them. So they then will act to change activity of the producing cell. So paracrine along neighboring cells, autocrine, auto means self. So like an autobiography is the biography told by yourself. For instance. So autocrine secretions affect the self cell. Okay, so there are two basic types of hormone structures. There are hormones that are synthesized from cholesterol. They're known as steroid hormones. And we frequently see the name, the steroid term, in the name of the secretion. So testosterone or estrogen, progesterone, though. So that name or the fact that it is a steroid hormone is reflected frequently in the name. And then there are non-steroid hormones, and these are hormones that are built from amino acids. So there are three different kinds of non-steroid hormones. There are ones that are called amines, and they are derived from a single amino acid, tyrosine, is the name of that amino acid. So single amino acid, steroid hormone. There are peptide, non-steroid hormones, and peptides are just short chains of amino acids, less than 100, give or take. And then finally, protein steroid hormones are really long chains of amino acids, and if you attach a sugar to it, then it's a glycoprotein. So proteins and glycoproteins are a third group of non-steroid hormones. And then last of all, there is a third type. This is a paracrine secretion called prostaglandins, and these are locally acting chemicals that are synthesized from a fatty acid, from one called arachidonic acid. Okay, so what happens then when a hormone is released? Well, it changes the metabolic processes of the cell. That's the effect that we talk about. It's some change in the metabolism of a cell. So it might turn on or turn off enzymes so that chemical reactions will proceed or will be stopped or will make a new material that has not been seen or used in the cell in a large amount. Again, it might move something across a cell membrane. And then finally, it may act at a DNA, turning on or off the production of specific proteins. So in order for this action to occur, the hormone must bind to the receptor that's present inside the cell or on the cell membrane of the cell. And the receptor is just a special protein that when it comes near a hormone will bind up that hormone and cause a change in the activity of the cell. So if we have a cell and it's not responding to a hormone, we can increase that cell's ability to respond to a hormone through what is called upregulation. Upregulation will put additional receptors in the cell or on the cell membrane, and then the cell can become responsive to the hormone. So frequently, this is how we can get cells activated to recognize a hormone, is through upregulation. We can also shut down a cell's ability to recognize a hormone. That is referred to as downregulation. With downregulation, we just remove the receptors from the cell membrane or from the nucleus of the cell, and boom, the cell can no longer respond to the hormone. So upregulation and downregulation are just means of either making a hormone or a cell very sensitive to a hormone or less sensitive to a hormone. All right, so we're going to talk first about steroid hormones. And if you've got your book with you, turn to page 492, and you can make notes in your book, or you can use this picture to try to make sense of it. So I'm going to use the picture first to describe what's going on, and then I'm going to give you some words in the next couple of slides about how steroid hormones do their thing. So here we have a steroid hormone built from cholesterol. If you were to turn to chapter 2, and look for the cholesterol molecule in chapter 2, you would see it has a structure very similar to this. These 6-carbon rings and then a 5-carbon ring here on the right side of the molecule. That is what a steroid hormone resembles. Now, steroid hormones, because they are built from cholesterol, are a lipid. And if you recall, the membrane, so we're seeing a cell here, and this is the cell membrane, and it fades off into the background as the perspective of the our ability to view a sphere from the backside is limited by all the stuff on the front side. So if hopefully this picture makes sense to you, we're looking at the cut edge of the cell membrane here and the interior of the membrane or of the cell. So because this hormone is lipid, and because we have a semi-permeable membrane here at the cell membrane, lipids are able to dissolve in this lipid bilayer. They are able to dissolve, in this lipid bilayer there where the nonpolar tails are oriented toward each other. So that means that a lipid molecule can move in, up to the cell, pass through that lipid bilayer, and make it to the interior of the cell. So now the hormone has just been able to walk right through the front door. When it comes up to the house, it doesn't even have to knock. It uses its own key, and it passes right into the house. And once it is dissolved in the cytoplasm, it will be transported toward the nucleus and pass through one of these nuclear pores, these openings through the nuclear membrane, and make its way into the interior of the nucleus. If this cell happens to be a target cell, then inside the nucleus it's going to find a receptor. And because of the shape and the structure of the protein receptor molecule, it will be able to bind, if it's a target cell for this hormone, it'll bind the steroid molecule to the receptor and produce what is referred to as the hormone receptor complex. So it's a complex molecule that is composed of the hormone bound to the receptor. Now, when the hormone binds that receptor, that's when the cell finally kicks into action. Because this molecule, this hormone receptor complex, is able to interact with the DNA, and it causes the two strands of the DNA to separate from each other at a specific section of that DNA. Now, for a moment, let's think about what DNA is. DNA is a nucleic acid, and it is produced as part of the reproduction of the cell. And so it carries with it all of the instructions that are required for building proteins in the cell or for the body. So DNA is all about making a protein. And it's a pretty straightforward process. All you have to do is break apart the chemical bond that's here holding this strand and this strand of the DNA together. Once we separate those two strands from each other, then there are enzymes that will slip in or that are part of this process, and those enzymes will be used to build a second copy off of one side of the DNA. And we build it using a kind of molecule, or from a kind of molecule that's referred to as mRNA. mRNA means messenger RNA. So this becomes a messenger that will be released by the cell, or I'm sorry, not released from the nucleus, and find its way out into the cytoplasm. Once it's out in the cytoplasm, because it's got instructions for building proteins, the ribosomes that are out in the cytoplasm will come and lock in on around this strand of messenger RNA. And every 3 nucleotides, notice here, every 3 nucleotides is carrying instructions, here's the next 3, is carrying instructions for what is the next amino acid in line for this protein that's being produced. So every time this is called transfer RNA, I don't need you to know that, tRNA. Transfer RNA has the opposite, the anticodon for the 3 nucleotide codon, and also, so that's what it carries at one end, is an anticodon that will be used to determine or to lock in that these three nucleotides that act as a codon are telling us to bring in this particular amino acid. The next 3 nucleotides in a row then are a codon that will code for this anticodon to come and lock in. And once it's locked in, a new peptide bond forms, adding one more amino acid to this newly forming protein molecule. And so it's this protein molecule that is responsible for the changes. It's the enzyme or the protein that's going to be placed here in the cell membrane that'll move stuff in and out of the cell. It's the structural components of that cell and how we build new cell parts. It's all these different functions are served. Oops. The last time I'm going to do that. Served by the protein that we produce. So this drawing is showing you exactly what happens with a steroid hormone. The hormone diffuses through the cell membrane, makes it into the nucleus, binds to the hormone, the receptor, producing the hormone receptor complex that unzips the DNA and allows the duplication or the replication of that DNA into a different kind of nucleic acid called messenger RNA. The messenger RNA leaves the nucleus where amino acids are then assembled using this string of commands in the form of the sequence of the nucleotides in the mRNA strand. So hopefully that makes sense to you now. So let me give you some words. So steroid hormones, they include materials like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and secretions that come from the adrenal cortex like aldosterone and cortisol or hydrocortisone. Those are the same materials. As I said before, they're built from cholesterol. They don't dissolve in water, but they will circulate in the blood plasma, dissolved and attached to plasma proteins. These transport proteins that carry stuff that won't dissolve in blood. When it reaches a cell, it passes right through the cell membrane. That semi-permeable cell membrane will allow lipids to pass through. If the cell is the target cell, then yahoo. If the cell's not a target cell, well then that's just a wasted bit of hormone. But if the cell is a target cell, then the hormone will bind the receptor that's found there inside the nucleus, and it produces this structure that we refer to as the hormone receptor complex, because it's a complex molecule that has the ability to recognize and respond to a hormone when it binds. Okay, so we got the hormone bound to the receptor protein, forming the hormone receptor complex. And I think I missed something. Oh, and then this triggers the production of mRNA that will then be used in the cytoplasm to assemble specific proteins at the ribosome. The proteins that we produce could be enzymes. They may be structural proteins. They might be transport proteins that will be put into the cell membrane, and they could be new receptor proteins, making the cell more receptive to some other hormone or to the hormone that made the receptor protein. So as the protein is made, then the effect associated with that as the protein is made, then we see the effect that's associated with the hormone expressed in the cell. So for instance, testosterone in a muscle cell will cause enzymes to be produced and will result in the production of the myofibrils, and that will increase the muscle size as we add to the myofibrils that are, we add new myofibrils into the cell, and then we'll get a stronger muscle as well. And then that hormone receptor complex may also turn off particular genes, preventing specific proteins from being assembled. So here is an example of an effect Here's an example of another effect associated with that hormone. And the effect is determined by the tissue or the cell that what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I just lost my train. Yeah, sorry, train's gone. Okay, so that's it for this section. And just to review very briefly, we talked about the functions of the endocrine system. We talked about hormones and the way that we identify a target cell by placing a receptor inside that cell. Talked about the two types of hormones, and then a third type of controlling chemical, prostaglandins, that are found in the body. And then we went on to talk about the function of the steroid hormone and how it gets into the cell in order to produce the protein. All right, see you in the next video.